Hey guys, A&A here. Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia has one of the greatest layouts ever devised. It has an amazing mix of forces with hang time, whip, positive Gs, floater airtime, and ejector. This is undoubtedly one of the best coasters in the area and comfortably fills the role as the standout coaster at the park. It was an absolute honor for this to be my first coaster outside the state of California. I had never ridden anything like this as there are no quote-unquote elite Intamin coasters in the state. So, in this review, I will break down Pantheon and my thoughts on it. Let's jump right in. Pantheon is a multi-launch blitz-style coaster from Intamin. Many enthusiasts were hoping that Busch Gardens would build something like this, and the community was beyond ecstatic when it was announced for 2020. But its opening was famously delayed for nearly 2 years because of the pandemic. And when it finally opened in early 2022, it was well worth the wait. It instantly became the park's best coaster for most, and was well received from the general public and enthusiasts because of its relatively smooth, fast, and fun layout. Although, one thing that was not so well received was the coaster's apparent lack of theming. Pantheon's plaza and queue are a stark contrast to the beauty of the rest of the park. While the themes are loose, they are done extremely well. Compare this to Pantheon, where the station is just a box and there are wooden fences around the queue with simple signs. At least the entry sign looks cool. But for me, this really doesn't affect what I think about Pantheon. I think that its forces and layout stand for itself, and it doesn't need the theming. Not to say that I don't think theming would improve the ride experience, it's just that the ride works fine without it. But even without theming, Pantheon still looks absolutely phenomenal. The dry gold track and white supports is one of the best color schemes ever devised. Walking up the bridge into the coaster's plaza presents you with Pantheon's daunting vertical spike. And in addition to this, you can get some rare footage of Pantheon from the train and from the river cruise. That is if you get lucky with the timing. And the trains not only look good, but they are the most comfortable in the industry. You feel secure and open at the same time, as your entire upper body is free to experience all those negative and lateral forces. These trains are similar to the lap bars on rides like Velocicoaster, Tutatis, and Terran, which are all super comfortable as well. Once you head up the ramp to enter the station, you will notice 3 things. 1. There is usually no grouper, so you can feel free to select any row you want. 2. Pantheon will be a station wait all day, except on summer weekends. This is unusual, as Pantheon is the park's best coaster, and it has average dispatch times and capacity. Maybe Griffin and Dark Coaster were taking some of the crowds away during my visit. 3rd, the operators are very strict on the no loose article policy. They won't even allow phones in zipper or Velcro pockets, so plan accordingly for that by either putting your items in the bins in the station or prematurely putting them in the lockers right outside the entrance. When you finally secure your loose articles and sit down into the glorious Intamin trains, you will proceed to be stapled hard. They are not joking around here. It honestly kinda hurt how hard they push down. But if that's what keeps everybody safe, then power to them. The best part about the restraint check though is that there is no seatbelt. This makes the dispatches faster so trains can keep pumping through the constant stream of riders. One more thing before I get into the ride experience. The G-forces described throughout the layout were recorded from my rides in the very back row, so that will reflect the average experience in the very back. Once you dispatch, you dip down into a section of S-curves that taunt you as you prepare yourself for the first launch. The said first launch has a surprising punch to it, pulling nearly 1.1 Gs of forward acceleration. You then traverse the first of 2 inversions, a slow 0G winder. The name perfectly describes the element as you slowly wind through it in blissful 0 Gs, getting great forceful hang time. This and the first launch is an amazing way to kickstart the ride. Afterwards, you dip down a hill into a surprisingly intense turn, sustaining around 3.5 Gs. Exiting this turn pops you into some overbanked humps that don't really give airtime. They just give a hint of float and amp you up for the following swing launch section. Now this is where Pantheon really gets going. You then slightly dip down into a brief section of LSMs that deliver a good burst of acceleration, hitting around 0.8 Gs. Afterwards, you coast over a bunny hill that delivers a tiny bit of float the first time. That leads into yet another burst of 0.8 G acceleration, which pushes you up into the top hat, pulling around 2.7 Gs, entering it. You then make it about halfway up, getting around 0 Gs afloat. The front goes higher up than the back rows, but back row riders will get their moment very soon, trust me. After you stall out, you then begin to travel backwards. This begins my favorite part of the coaster. After that section of LSMs again, getting around negative 0.9 Gs of acceleration, you pop into the bunny hill once again. But this time, you are traveling so much faster. This is one of the most surprising and violent pops of negative 1G ejector airtime you can experience in the world. After the airtime pop, you traverse the other set of LSMs, getting another bit of negative 0.8 G acceleration. But remember that little dip after the outer banked humps? Well, you're traveling twice as fast now, so that becomes yet another surprise ejector pop, pulling around negative 0.5 Gs for a split second. You then sustain 4.4 Gs, pulling into the vertical spike backwards. This spike is absolutely insane in the back row as you travel so far up it. And the best part? You sustain 0 Gs for nearly 5 seconds. Afterwards, you regain all your speed as you careen into the last burst of 0.7 G acceleration, now going forwards. After sustaining another 3.8 Gs exiting the spike, you dip down yet again, pulling negative 0.4 Gs. You then soar through the bunny hill for the final time, pulling negative 1 Gs. The second time around has slightly stronger airtime, but you can prepare yourself for it this time. You see where you're going traveling forwards, whereas going backwards it catches you off guard. After getting the last bit of acceleration, you'll pull around 4 Gs whipping into the top hat. Now, just think for a second what you just experienced. You just got 6 bursts of acceleration, making it feel like you launched 6 times. You also got some of the most elite ejector airtime going backwards. And in the middle of all this chaos, just traversed a massive vertical spike floating out of your seat for 5 seconds. If that isn't elite, I don't know what the heck is. Now, getting back to the layout. When you reach the peak of the top hat, you get a great view of the Rhine River to your left and the front of you. And if you look to your right, you get a great view of the park, especially Festa Italia. And you have a decent amount of time to look as well, as you kind of stall up there for a good 2 seconds. But riders in the back are in for quite the surprise. The following 180-foot or 54-meter drop down the hillside is the most sustained ejector moment I've ever experienced. Yes, over Twisted Timber's first Camelback, and over anything on Twisted Colossus, Wonder Woman, or any other RMC I've ridden. You just keep falling and falling forever. Even riders in the front get a little lift too, it's that steep. It is 95 degrees after all. Following that is a tight pullout that sustains 4.1 Gs for around 3 seconds. It is the most intense part of the ride. You are definitely going to start to see some gray here. It is also the fastest part of the ride, as the drop perfectly uses the terrain to its advantage. After hitting your max speed of 73 miles per hour or 117 kilometers per hour, you pull up into a massive overbank hill. If you've ridden coasters like Conda or Steel Vengeance, those overbanks have serious sustained ejector, but Pantheon's overbank is more of the strong floater variety. It sustains around negative 0.3 Gs for 5 seconds, but if you're in the back, the airtime gets stronger as you exit it, giving a nice 0.9 G pop coming out of the overbank. After a quick 4G pullout, you jump into a quick pop of negative 0.2 G airtime combined with 0.8 Gs of laterals. This combination creates a pretty wild airtime moment. That leads into a quick 3.8 G turn that pulls into the 0 G stall. It has nasty whip leading in and coming out of it, pulling 1 G of laterals respectively. It also sustains negative 0.3 Gs, giving nearly 3 seconds of glorious forceful hang time. And in combination with the hang time, you have these terrifying head choppers with the supports under you. It really feels like your hands might be chopped off, but the best head chopper is still to come. After whipping out of the stall, you careen down the hill for the last time, dipping under the first drop. This crazy head chopper is most likely the reason why Pantheon has a max rider height restriction of just 6'3" or 2 meters, which isn't even that tall in regards to riding coasters. That really shows how tight this clearance is. Another thing this dip does well is it sustains 3.7 Gs for a good amount of time, creating another slight grayout moment. You then pull into these quick side-to-side turns that have great sense of speed and give powerful lateral jolts. I was expecting these to be a bit uncomfortable, but they are surprisingly fluid and smooth. Afterwards, you hop into the final element, a sideways airtime hill. You pull around 3 Gs entering it and sustain negative 0.2 Gs through the hill. You then smoothly coast into the brake run, ending to 3,328 feet or 1,014 meters of track. Now, before I say my final thoughts, I do want to mention the smoothness of Pantheon. I'm not sure if the wheels needed to be changed, or if Pantheon was just having a bad day, or maybe it was because I was tired and sleep deprived, but I felt a slight persistent rattle throughout the entire layout, especially in high G valleys. This is to contrast with what most people say, that Pantheon is a glossy smooth coaster. but the said rattle was very minimal. If you don't look for it, you probably won't notice it. To finalize, Pantheon is an absolutely exceptional coaster that exceeded all of my expectations and more. The fact that it was my first coaster outside of my home state was an absolute honor. It instantly became my number one over anything in California. It has such a dynamic layout and every single element hits. Its number one ranking has since changed, but I'll get into that for another video. Stay tuned. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my review of Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like or even a sub, that'd be pretty cool. And thanks for making it all the way through the video, I really appreciate it. And if you have any comments or suggestions on what you think of this coaster or my opinions, type it down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.